You're here. This is going to be a special episode. It's something that I don't know. I guess I've always been fascinated with. There was a documentary about the voiceover, and there was like a show about it of the old movie. Announcers that I thought was really fascinating. And so we're going to be talking all about sound today. And we've got Jodi Krangle here, who is just, I met her at Podfest. I think it was Podfest or Podcast Movement. Either way, she is a lovely person. She has got so much great knowledge all about sound and audio branding and marketing. It's really, really fascinating, and it makes a bigger difference than you really think. So we're going to be talking about that today. Make sure that you guys ask your questions down below wherever you are watching from, because I want to make the show all about you. And if you know somebody who's like trying to get their podcast maybe to sound better, or maybe they want to, they're thinking about becoming a voice actor, that's something they're interested in, make sure you mention them down below wherever you're watching from and call them into the conversation, and we'll try to bring up as many questions as we can possible. So Ian Anderson Gray is also an amazing voice. He's here to elevate the show with his English accent. Ian, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing good. Am I just a voice? That's basically.
No, you're a good friend too. Yeah, Ian and I are going to hang out together at Ecamm's Creator Camp. So, and Martin is here in the house. So I want to give a shout out to Martin, saying, "I am so glad I am here too." Well, Martin, we are so glad that you're here. Your comment is very, very big. I will move that down just like that. And thank you for showing up as always to see you. And we've got Gary Stockton as well. He says, "Great to see you, Jodi." Gary was actually in the comments, and he's usually in the comments on when we watch Dave Jackson's Saturday show. So Gary, good to see you. Jodi, where are you from, by the way? I'm not exactly sure. Is it Toronto?
Yeah, I'm north of Toronto.
Okay, very, very cool. So, all right, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hit go on the podcast machine, and we will get started. Hello, folks. Welcome to Social Media News Live. I'm Jeff C., and you're not.
And I'm Ian Anderson Gray, and this is the show that keeps you up to date on what's happening in the world of social media and more.
Have you ever considered how sound can shape the way we perceive brands? Are you intrigued by maybe the potential of audio branding to elevate your business? Or maybe you're eager to learn how to enhance the audio quality of your podcasts and videos. If these thoughts sound like something you'd be interested in, then you're in for an enlightening experience. Today, we're excited to welcome a guest whose world completely revolves around sound. She's a professional voice actor who has worked with major brands and will be sharing her insights, experiences, and practical tips on the power of sound. So sit back, clear your schedule, clear your mind, and get ready for this week's episode of Social Media News Live. Jodi, how are you doing today?
I am doing great. Thanks.
This is going to be a blast. Yeah, it's going to be fun. So, Ian, tell us all about Jodi for people who have not met her before.
So, Jodi Krangle is a Toronto-based voice actor who works with major brands all over the world, including DELL, BBVA, HGTV, Nespresso, and Kraft. She's been heard in thousands of your favorite commercials and on your favorite brand websites too. Her voice has been described as warm, friendly, and comforting with a hint of gravitas, and coupled with a year's professional work in sound will take your project to the next level.
Yeah, Jodi, so I want to dive right in because,
Sure.
Voice acting is just something, you don't know a lot of people who engineers, some people maybe who are doctors, but like voice actors is kind of an outlier. So how did you get interested in this? And you've been doing it for quite a long time. So how did you get started?
Yeah, I'm coming up on 17 years now. So
wow.
Yeah. In the beginning, I really didn't know what it was. I think a lot of people hear it in the background and just don't realize that there's actually someone doing that.
Right.
What happened with me is in 1995-96, I volunteered my time at the CNIB, which is the Canadian National Institute for the Blind. Mm-hmm. And I was reading magazine articles onto reel-to-reel tape at the time.
Wow.
So it was quite some time ago, yes. I don't know whether that was the tech of the time or if that was just the government.
Right.
That's what they had access to. So, yeah. But it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. I learned a ton, and I liked the tech as much as I liked the voicing, which to me said, okay, maybe this could be something. but I didn't actually end up doing anything with it until SEO and internet marketing, which is what I'd been doing before, got really boring. So I'm kind of right and left brained, which means that I am creative. I like that side of things. I'm a singer. I enjoy using my voice. I enjoyed making art, writing songs. I was doing that for a long time. I had a songwriting resource on the web called The Muse's Muse for, like 21 years, actually. It went from 95 to 2016. And it was pretty big. And in fact, Dave Jackson remembers it, which is kind of, again, how, how we connected as well. So that taught me a lot about internet marketing and SEO on a budget because I had no money and I was making this website a going concern and accepting sponsorship and banner ads and that kind of thing. So that was a sort of supplement to my income.
Gotcha.
And when I was doing SEO and internet marketing, I was doing it based on what I had learned from that website for other people because, why not tell them what I had learned as an early adopter of the internet. And when I started, things were really interesting. It was kind of an art and a science. And when I decided in 2007 that it was just not for me anymore, it was boring because Google was it. That was the only thing left. Right? Like at that point, it was like, okay, so now this is just one algorithm that I need to pay attention to. I'm like, this is boring as AF, right? I just so I was like, okay, maybe it's time to really give this voiceover thing a try. It had been percolating in the back of my head for a while. And because I'm both right and left brained, I like the logical stuff as well as the creative stuff.
Right.
So I knew that this needed to be a business and I knew that I needed to make money at it, that it wasn't just it was a creative pursuit, but it wasn't just a creative pursuit. And my love of computers kind of egged me on because when I first started, I was like, well, I'm not going to look in my own backyard. I'm going to look on the world stage on the internet. Why would I just, So now it turns out most of my clients, about 95% of them are in the US. It's, and that's an interesting shift because, of course, my accent had to shift.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I now say process instead of process, like regular things like that. My outs and abouts need to be, particularly American. I can't get hired if they want a Canadian voice in Canada now.
You trained yourself. That's funny.
Yeah.
So I was, thinking about this, the voice acting thing. One of the things that I always wondered about, and maybe you can, so backing up, my wife, I was playing some of your samples and she goes, I recognize that voice. And so I had written in my email newsletter to promote this, that so many people, they may not recognize Jodi, but they'll recognize her voice because you have done this for so long for so many big brands like HGTV. That's where my wife recognized your voice from because she's a big HGTV watcher.
Buying and selling. Yeah. It was a spinoff of the Property Brothers. I did about a year and a half. Actually.
Yeah. So she recognized that right away because it's a 24/7 over on our house that channel's on. But one of the things, and I noticed you did some health ads and some other things. I mean, you have tons of different varieties of commercials that you've done. But the question I was going to ask you, I've always wondered, those people have to say all those, like, these drugs may kill you, at the end of the thing. Like, we have to go really, really fast. Do you have to do that too? Is there a technique that
I've done those.
Do you just have to like book through them? How do you speak so fast? Is it multiple takes? What are your? It just is fascinating.
It depends.
Okay.
It depends. Actually, in prior years, it used to be that you would do this and they would have you do it really fast, but then they might even speed it up further. That's a post-production thing.
Okay.
So they might even speed it up faster. Nowadays, it's interesting because people want you to do it in a more conversational tone.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't want you to speed it up hugely in certain instances. It depends on the drug and it depends on the company that's doing the advertising because all of them are different and all of them have different requirements. if they have a really, really long commercial that they then need to tack this on to the end of, then yes, it needs to be super fast.
Gotcha.
But if they have the time, they're going to let you read it at a regular pace, and it sounds more natural that way. And yeah, I'm finding nowadays that they do want it to be more conversational than, speeding through this disclaimer.
Right. Okay. I just, because I remember there's this one guy you would always hear all the time. He's like, and I'm like, whoa, how do you train yourself how to do that? So,
you do have to speak fast, but at the same time, they do speed it up in post.
Okay.
So a lot of this is like maybe he didn't have to speak quite that fast.
Yeah. So I want to jump right into the sound and behavior, because your podcast touches on this a lot, which is really, really great. It's a great podcast for anybody who's interested in this. They need to check out Jodi's podcast. And some of the articles on your blog are really, really good. And one of these one of these things that you were talking about on I think one of your articles was about how sound can modify human behavior. With you use this example, and you actually have a video embedded in your website about the piano stairs experiment. So can you talk about that and how sound affected actually behavior for people on the street?
Yeah, it was a really interesting experiment. So I can't remember where exactly it was. I think it was a Nordic country somewhere. Right. And they put together a stairway to entice people to get more exercise in their day. Mm-hmm. So they put sound on the stairs to simulate a piano. And people would go up and down the stairs just to play the piano. And people got more exercise as a result. Mm-hmm. So there was a escalator right next to it, and they were finding that more and more people were actually taking the stairs in order to play this piano, which I thought it was a great idea. So that's how they were modifying behavior. They were getting people to get more exercise because it was so cool to go up and down the stairs playing this piano.
Yeah, it was funny because it showed the before when it was just playing and everybody was taking that, everybody, and it's right next to it, to it. And then when they put the piano, and it reminded me of that scene from Big. That's an old movie with Tom Hanks, where they could jump on the big giant piano keys, and it eventually modified behavior so much that nobody was taking the escalator. Old people were using their canes going up it, and it was really, really fascinating. So yeah, it was really, really cool.
There's a lot to do for entertainment.
Yeah.
One thing that's really interested me is when you go around shops and stores and restaurants and things like that, and maybe it's because I'm a musician, that's my background, but how does background music in stores and restaurants influence consumer behavior and spending? I've heard different reports, different genres of music and things like that.
Yeah, there is so much. It's really interesting. A lot of audio branding specific companies, I know Cesium Song has done a lot of testing in this. And I just recently interviewed Valentin Fleur. My God. Okay. I'm screwing up that name. Pardon me. Valentin Fleur is his name. He is a audio branding expert here in the Toronto area, and he works with Cesium Song. And he's done some work with Interac, which is a tap your card on a payment machine kind of thing. Yeah, so that's really big here in Canada. And what they were doing was they were creating soundscapes for people to listen to while they were shopping in stores. And it was specifically with the Interac brand, and it was in order to get people to give more consideration to what they were buying and then to be happier with their purchases after they've bought. So rather than enticing people to spend more money, they were actually getting people to think more consciously about what they were spending and how much, why they were spending it, basically. So I think the type of music that they were listening to was mostly in major keys, and it was mostly switching beats. So it was making people pay attention to what they were listening, but still making them happy, So really interesting ideas behind this. And stores definitely use this like there are stores that are for younger people that blast really loud techno music specifically so that they attract the younger crowd and repel the older crowd.
Right.
Like Hot Topics. I mean, you ever walk into a Hot Topics store? I mean,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like things like that, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, there are people who are very, very, companies that are very, very conscious of this. And, it happens in restaurants a lot as well. So if you're listening, I am about to interview a fellow named Pavle Marinkovic, and he wrote a book called Sounds from Farm to Fork and Back. It's really fascinating stuff. And he talks a lot about food and sound. So how it's produced, what happens when we eat it in a sound environment, how that changes our taste buds, what it does to either help vegetables grow or
Right.
and cattle make more milk,
Yeah.
like all sorts of really interesting things, and how it will induce certain decay, like you want things to be able to melt
Break
back
down,
into
yeah.
the environment,
Yeah.
right? Different types of sounds that will help that. He did a chocolate experiment on his own I've just been reading about it. It's fascinating. So chocolate has a whole bunch of notes to it, like flavor notes, what I mean. So it can be very sweet. It can be bitter. It can be somewhere in between. It can taste earthy. It can, different flavor notes are brought out by certain sounds. So he was finding that lower sounds, like lower bass sounds, were making things more bitter, and higher pitched sounds were making them sweeter. So he had
really
people
interesting.
tasting in a particular store that he had an agreement with, and he was doing this experiment. He had people taste the chocolate while they were listening to lower pitched or higher pitched music, and had them describe what the taste was that they were getting. And then he'd do it again with another piece of chocolate. What he didn't tell them was that it was the same chocolate.
Oh, wow. That's really interesting. And
Yeah.
I was listening to you and Chris's Stone's podcast the other day, and it was a great 2-part series about that. And you guys both talked about how in marketing and even like businesses that it's the last thing that a lot of people think about, but it can, but when it's bad, it's the first thing you notice, right? Like, so, we've always said, even with live streaming, and Ian and I, like, you can forgive bad video, you cannot forgive bad audio. And that's why I'm actually sweltering now. I turned off my air conditioner in my office. Oh, and my camera just went out. I'll fix it here in a minute. But one of the things is that I was a little intimidated with Jodi being on because I wanted my audio to sound good. Because people will forgive my camera going out. Perfect example. But they will not forget my audio not working. So one of the things on your website, while I fix this, Jodi, is that you talked about how important sounds, and this was even in the interview with you and Chris, sounds are in a hospital environment, and why I think you've even talked to some hospitals about fixing some of the issues they have. So would you talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah. Pardon me. I haven't spoken to hospitals per se, but I've spoken to some nurses. I've spoken to a fellow named, oh my goodness. It's Michael, but I can't remember the name. I'm totally blanking now. It's all about how beeps are killing us.
Oh, yeah.
And he's very much he's a marimba player. It's basically, it's like a musical instrument, but you're like hitting keys with a instrument. It's like with a little hammer, right? And it's very percussion heavy, and so he Michael Schutz, I believe is his name. He was talking about this in relation to hospitals, because he was saying that the beeps in those hospitals are keeping us from recovering as quickly as we could. So part of the problem is that since the 50s, we have put so many more instruments, medical instruments that are monitoring us, not needing to be alarming, but there are so many more than there used to be. And so
Right.
the noise level in a hospital has gone up exponentially for many, many years now. And his mother-in-law is a nurse, and she's called it a beeping hellscape.
That's that's not good. It's
Yeah.
funny, but it's not good.
That's
Yeah, but yeah.
It's really not good. No. So a lot of what is happening in hospitals now, and new hospitals are developing this as something that they pay very close attention to, is that they're starting to change the sounds in the hospitals on those machines, because right now they're very computer like, it's a very computer like beep, and then it just cuts off. There's
Right.
no decay, there's no nothing.
Right.
And it just
It's
and
nerve-wracking.
they're alarming when they don't need to be an alarm, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of these instruments are monitoring us. They're just saying, yeah, you have a heartbeat.
right.
But they're not, they don't need to be sounding like an alarm when they're monitoring a heartbeat.
Right.
Like they don't need to be doing that. So, first of all, there's ways to make them less intrusive so that someone in a hospital environment can actually sleep.
Right.
And if you need it to be alarming, it can be an alarming sound. But there are so many of these machines now. It's keeping
Right.
us from getting better in an environment that's supposed to heal us.
It's almost sound pollution. I mean, even the notifications
Yeah.
we have on our phones and stuff, like that's the first thing is to turn those off, because you don't need to get dinged all the time. So
Yes.
Gary,
I have my phone on vibrate all the time.
yeah, Gary says, I think hospitals just need more cowbell. Well, maybe Gary. That would be an interesting thing. It would probably be more soothing than a flatline thing. But
It
thank you.
would.
Yeah. Yeah. So more
Like have a
cowbell.
bird tweet or something.
That's
I don't
right.
know.
Yeah.
But we know those sounds even from TV. Like, you hear that in
Yeah.
ER, and then you hear the flatline. And like half the
Yeah.
time it's just somebody unplugged their thing accidentally, and it sounds like you're
Yeah.
dying. You're dead. You're dead pretty much.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah.
I think some of these machines are like full of their own self-importance. Like they come up with these relentless sounds, and they just don't need to. Just like
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But I wanted to kind of move on to businesses. So we've talked about I don't know, retailers and
Hospitals, yeah.
restaurants and then hospitals. How can businesses use sound to enhance their marketing strategies effectively?
I think it's really important, first of all, for them to think about it, because a lot of people don't even give it any consideration at all. So there are lots of places that your company has as a touch point to the general public. That could be your on hold. It could be the videos you make. It could be your CEO coming on a stage. It could be a radio commercial or anything online, like a video that you're doing that you might have on your website. There's all sorts of ways that you have to touch your audience with sound. And sound is what reaches our emotions. It's what gives us emotional context. So if you really want to reach your audience and be a going concern and actually understand where they're coming from and have them understand you, sound is how you do that. That's kind of the best way that I could explain that. But it does mean that you need to consistently and repetitiously use the sound that you create. So if you have a particular music piece, for instance, this works really well on podcasts as the intro and outro music, or the in-between music that you use for, like, if an ad's coming on or something like that, and then like the beginning of the ad, the end of the ad, like you have music in between there for a quick scene change kind of idea. If you're using a piece of music consistently, then when that music plays, people know what's coming. They understand it. So, when you hear da 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 da, like, what do you hear? Like, we all know what that is, right?
Right.
And it's because it was used so repetitiously and so continuously on every tech commercial we heard for so many years, it's become this huge iconic sonic brand. and like a sonic logo.
Yeah.
And it really needs to be used. I think part of the thing that I'm trying to say here is if you settle on something, use it.
That's, and I think
Part of
taking,
yeah.
like I think Kristen, you were talking about this, but part of the thing is that you have something that you really like and that's consistent. And we're going to talk about in the next section, the audio branding, like McDonald's, I'm loving it. And you had a guy on talking about that example exactly, and how they can change the music up, but at the end it's always that ba-da-ba-ba-ba, I'm loving it thing that they can change and play with. But it's those little notes, and like it's even Disney, when you wish upon a star, they'll weave that into a lot of their branding.
Yeah.
Those little notes at the beginning. So, and even if you don't consciously know it, you subconsciously do, and it reminds you of that brand. So, very, very cool. We got some great questions that I can't wait to get to. But I was so excited that I got Jodi here. I forgot to mention the sponsors of the show, which is Ecamm, ecamm.com/Jeff. You can find out more about them there. They're actually having a summer sale. So if you go there, if you go to ecamm.com/Jeff, there's a code that they'll give you to give you 30% off of the summer sale. So make sure you guys go check that out, ecamm.com/Jeff. They've got Zoom integration, which has been great because we had a little issue today with Jodi's camera. But luckily, I said, hey, try the Zoom link. Boom, she's in there. Ian came in with Ecamm. So it's really cool that you can send them both ways and not stress too much getting everybody into your show. So ecamm.com/Jeff. Let's talk about audio branding. And we've got some great questions. We were talking about podcasts. And first of all, John says this. He goes, great to see a live stream on LinkedIn where the audio sounds A1 nice. So
I'm glad to
thank
hear
you,
it.
John. Appreciate it. It's the magic of Ecamm. One of the things, and Chris has, but I want to get to Gary's question first. He goes, Jodi, do you have any recommendations on stock music for corporate videos? I spend an eternity trying to pick out the right music for my productions.
Yeah, there are so many out there. I've heard of Pond 5.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard of YouTube has. Oh my God,
They
I'm
have their
totally blanking.
yeah.
on
They have their
things now, but
Artlist.io is a great one.
Epidemic
Yes,
Sound.
yes.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, Epidemic Sound has some great stuff.
Yeah.
Really, really good. If you are wanting to keep consistent with your brand, you might actually want to hire a musician to make you some music that can then be modified depending on the mood you want to convey. So I wouldn't suggest this for everybody because it's probably more expensive than having a membership to, say, Epidemic Sound. But at the same time, that music then becomes yours and no one else can use that music. That means that your nearest competitor can't use the same music you are, which happens.
Yeah.
On many advertising campaigns, let me just add.
It was the same say with when doing like artwork for a website. Like you would see the artwork that you picked and you fixed on somebody else's website, and you're like, well, that's stock photos. So that's a great point. Ian, you did a lot of cool audio stuff for your podcast, for your live show. Now, what would you tell Gary? Like, that's all custom stuff that you did, right?
Yeah, it was. Like I did. So for my episodes, when I had a guest on, I would ask them what kind of style of music they wanted, and I actually went to Epidemic Sounds, and then I kind of sang over the top, and I multi-tracked it, and I had a lot of fun. And I've also done stuff for Mark Schaefer for his podcast in the past, where I would basically sing a really silly song. So he used that for the start of his podcast a while back. And I think the thing about this is I think you're being a lot more creative. It's no one else is going to make it quite like that. And again, this is stuff that you're going to keep. My concern about using the likes of Epidemic Sound is that the track that you have chosen, what if that they pull that off and then it's no longer there. So I think if you own it, if it's a musician that you've used, and also you're supporting musicians, I think we should be supporting them as well.
Right.
So yeah, there's a lot of and there's a lot of fun, I think. Have some fun with it.
And Gary's a musician, so he could. I wonder if he's maybe nervous to use it for his business or something. But Gary, I know you're talented, and I've seen you play on some of your reels, so you should just use some of that kind of stuff.
What he could do just to sort of spin off of this, what he could do is take a track from Epidemic Sound or Pod 5 or wherever and get the feel of it and give that to the client and say, is this what you're after, this kind of feel? And then make something, or give it to a musician to sort of make something that has a similar feel to it.
That's really
good
cool.
idea.
That's a really good idea.
But I mean, supporting musicians, because they're not making any money from Spotify, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tough road to hoe. So,
Yeah.
and Chris had a great question because this kind of ties into it. He goes, Jodi, what are the best and worst parts of AI for audio?
I think AI has its uses. I think it's a good starting point for the spark of inspiration. I think that's fantastic. AI can be really good as far as voice synthesis is concerned. If your original voice talent isn't available and you need to change a word, let the voice talent know that you're using their voice, pardon me, in that way. But, occasionally it can work really well. Translations can be super easy, depending, because there's nuances there. And things that change on a very regular basis, voice-wise, I think the AI is really great for, like continually changing Weather Channel or IVR that changes on a daily basis, or things like that. I think it can be really good. The problem that I see is that you will get pardon me. You will get occasionally AI won't say place names or names right. It'll just get them wrong. So if you're just relying on AI to get it right, it's not going to. So you want to make sure you're monitoring things like that. Also, the inflection on words can be weird. The spacing in between sentences or where it starts and ends can be strange. And in a lot of instances, you're going to spend as much time fixing those things as it would take a voice actor to get you what you need in 10 minutes.
Right. Yeah. So I've played with Artlist now has voiceovers now, that artlist.io. And I played with them a little bit. And you're right, getting the when you're creating like AI artwork or you're creating audio, you have to what we call roll. You're rolling it over and over and over, trying to get what you want. And by the time you're done, you could have probably, Jodi can nail it out there really fast. Like she can get it done, give you a couple different reads, and then like that's perfect. They're still lacking that something, and it's hard to put your finger on it. Everybody goes, "Oh, cool! You can just type now, and they'll say it." Well, you can feel it, and this is a great one for both of you because you're both musicians. George asks, how do you feel about AI generated music, such as from Sumo? Because this is the worst it's going to get right now. Like it's pretty good. Like a lot of this music that you can auto generate. So what are your guys' thoughts about that as musicians, AI generated music? Jodi, go. I'd like to know what you think.
I think it has its place. Again, I don't know, maybe with like backgrounds of those really quick like Opus clip things that you're using from, the AI generated snippets from your podcast video, that kind of thing. I think it can work really well. I think that I just don't see it replacing an actual musician.
Right.
I mean, it's quick and it's dirty, and I don't know how original it is. That's kind of the problem, right? Because all of these things are generated from already created music.
Right.
And like, I don't know. I'm sure it'll get better.
It's a weird thing. I mean, I like the idea of just like with AI, like I'm working through a rebrand for our show, and I am using AI to create ideas, right? Like all different things that I maybe not even think about. And so I'm going to take that when I get it almost the way I want and give it to a designer, because it's AI right now can't take it and make it, Adobe Illustrator file, vector-based artwork that I need for a logo. So I can give them an idea. So I kind of feel like AI stuff, music is that way. What are your thoughts, Ian?
Yeah, I think a similar thing. I think it's great for ideas, and I think it's fine for that kind of background music if it doesn't need to be particularly original. It's just something in the background. Like I've done videos, a YouTube video, where it's just good to have something in the background just to create a bit of interest. But I think I don't think it's going to lack the creativity of a human being, and my concern about it is that even though that is the case, that it might just be good enough for most people because they're not really thinking about the big picture here. They're kind of thinking, well, I just need something in the background. That's kind of okay. And then we're going to stop. Musicians are going to be in a worse state than they already are because they're not going to create this original music because AI music is going to be generating a lot of it. So I do think, I don't know what you think of this, but I do think we do have a duty to support actual musicians creating this music. Not to say we shouldn't use AI, but I worry about that. We've already seen that in the musical world where you go to a show, like 150 years ago, you'd have a full orchestra, full band. Now you've probably got a couple of musicians if you're lucky, because they're expensive. Musicians are expensive. So yeah. I do feel quite strongly about that. But on the other hand, if I'm going to, as a business owner, yeah, I have to think about the money. And if it's going to be cheaper to generate it using AI, then I might be tempted.
There's so many. This would be a whole rabbit trail. But anyway, I want to get back to, because
actually,
go ahead.
Could I just mention one thing?
Yeah.
We have been using AI in music for a very long time now. All of those sampled music things from like a Roland piano, for instance, that's AI. That's like sampled music is all like we've been using it for a long time now. This is just next generation.
It's just, because you don't want to. Most musicians do things for the love of it. Like they love music, they love to do it. And it's going to be harder and harder, I fear, for those to make a full-time living in it, unless they're the outliers where they can do stuff outside of it. So anyway, just what Jodi and Ian said, support your local musician, like buy their stuff. If it's a small band, buy their t-shirts and their artwork, help them out, because it is a tough gig. I want to go back into audio branding for businesses, because a lot of people who watch the show and listen to the show are marketers or solopreneurs or entrepreneurs. And can you how can small businesses start incorporating audio branding into their marketing efforts? Like, what's a small step that they can do to start doing sound right?
Pay attention to it very first. I would say, and I'm a little biased in this aspect, but I would say get a voice actor whose voice matches your brand and use that voice consistently in anything you do, because people will get used to that voice and that will be your voice, and it will be a comfort to the people that come and experience your brand. Likewise with music. Once you get music, and I'm not necessarily talking about a sonic logo, that can come with time. Sometimes those things kind of evolve, which is really interesting. But music that you own, if you want to use AI, maybe use it as the inspiration for a musician to go and make something that has a similar feel.
Right.
But the first thing I would tell a company is to find out who you are and find out who your clients are, because you don't just want music that you want, that you like. You want music that you like, but also that will reach your target audience, right? So it's what they like too. So it's not just about what you like. In fact, it's more about what they like.
Right.
Because you want to attract the audience that you want to attract. And the way that you're going to do that is sound. That sound is going to draw them in.
Going back to your conversation with Chris on this subject, it was really good that, Chris made a good point of like, so Dealcasters is a tech-based show. They do and they've been on the show before. So go back and listen to that episode if you're listening. But they're very high energy. It's a tech brand. It's all this stuff. And so it's a lot of motion, a lot of, hard energy, I guess. And his other clients, he doesn't have that for, because he knows what that audience is. And so I think what you just said, Jodi, is super important, that we know what our audience wants, and it's not going to like, oh, why I didn't come to listen to a hard rock song before the podcast on meditation. That doesn't work. It's going to be, you want to have some like nice little like mellow music going into it. Gary Stockton says, one podcast that stands out to him for great audio is the Daily from the New York Times. Always perfect for their stories. And audio does make a big deal. How you feel about the feeling or the emotions you get for storytelling. And where was it? Gary said that he really loved in your openers that you did for Mark Schaefer back in the day. So those different things that are unique to the brand make a big difference. So I wanted to point that out because once again, go back and listen to Jodi's episode with Chris Stone because it's a really, really good one.
We had a lot of fun. I will say that one of the things that people really need to pay attention to is in their audio brand is who they are as a company. I think a lot of people gloss over that. They don't really know who they are and who they're trying to reach. So that's your number one. I mean, if you want to do this in terms of archetypes, then figure out which archetype you are and which archetype your audience is. Mm-hmm. And then you have a better idea of where your marketing should go. I mean, this is marketing 101. If anyone's a marketer out there, they know all this already. Right. But you have to explain this likely to the companies that you're working with. So it's important. And it's not just important in the visual sense, it's important in the audio sense as well. I think people need to pay as much attention to that as they do the visuals.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. I think it makes sense definitely with visuals and the content, the copy, but I think we can forget the audio, like the type of music, the genre, all of that kind of stuff when it comes to marketing. I'd love to know if you've got any examples of successful audio branding from major companies. Can you give us some examples?
Well, I mean, Intel definitely is one of them. Yeah. We all know Intel. And the way that they did that was really interesting, too, because they bought ads on the end of other tech company ads. So they partially paid for, like, they didn't have to pay the entire thing. They were a new company at the time. And they just went, hey, we'll substitute, we'll like help you pay for this ad if you put our stuff at the end of your ad. And the quickest way to do that was their little Sonic logo with the, Intel inside, right? So we all saw that on every tech thing that was out there for a huge amount of time. But, things like I was saying before, a lot of times Sonic logos develop. So McDonald's Sonic logo really started as a Justin Timberlake song. And it was being played for about a year, I think, with Justin Timberlake on it. And they were using that in all of their branding. And then they had someone else sing it instead, because I guess Justin Timberlake was too expensive to keep on paying. Probably. Right? So they had like a sound-alike, do a version of. And then they were only using the chorus. And then the chorus got boiled down to those 5 notes, like da 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 da. Like that's all we, right? So it was something that happened over time because that's what stuck with the people that were experiencing their ads, and whatever touch points they had. It got boiled down to its essence is what happened. And even with my own audio branding podcast, when I started out, I was using a license-free music thing that I got from a directory because I had no money. A lot of us do that, when we're starting out. We don't want to spend a whole huge amount of money. Fine, we get something from a license-free music directory. Okay. So I was using this thing for about 100 episodes, I think, something like that. And it had this really catchy dun-dun-dun-dun-dun guitar thing, right? And I loved that. It was an earworm to me. And it reached out to my audience and said, hey, pay attention. Which I really liked. That's really... Because, that's what audio branding is all about, right? So I was like, okay, sure. And then I paid someone else to make a music piece that was something similar. It still had that, guitar riff in the beginning, but it was a little more grungy. And I liked that for a little while. We had that for about 50 episodes. And then after that, I interviewed another fellow from a place called Saw and Sign, I believe, in the UK. And he put together something different that sort of sounded a little more techno to me, a little more futuristic.
Yeah.
And I've been using that one ever since. But it still has that guitar riff in the beginning of it.
That's
It
cool.
still has that, dun
Yeah.
dun dun dun, like that part in the beginning. I really liked that. So it's an evolving brand. I would never say that your audio brand is written in stone. I would say as you change as a company, as you grow, as you move into different aspects of whatever your company offers, your audio brand can change along with you, just the way your visual logo can change. And these things are not written in stone. They're not static. They're not cement. They are an ever-living organism, just like your business is.
Right. That's a great point. Good, because we're getting ready to change all our stuff. So, but I want to talk about bad audio, because when you're talking about McDonald's, I just thought about, I don't know if you have them there in Canada, but the BK, the Burger King things, they're almost singing off key, and it drives me nuts, but it gets in your head. And like, I know they did this on purpose. It sounds like somebody just kind of going, have it your way.
It's a musical style.
But it's just like, ugh, I think it's bad audio, but it's like, but it's just like, anyway, I digress.
But you know what? I'll bet it's not for you.
It probably is not. Like, no, I
mean,
I look
that,
like a guy can
their
eat a lot of
audience-
hamburgers, like, no, that's, I'll eat some
I
hamburgers.
hate to say this, but it's probably not for me either. It's probably
Right.
for a younger crowd
Right.
because that's the type of music they listen to.
Right. You're right. You're right.
They
And
know what they're going for.
that's true. Like Burger King, and if you mentioned Hot Topic earlier, like if I walk into Hot Topic, they escort me out. But let me see. We've got some great questions here. So comments. Chris says, bad AI is affecting good art and, more importantly, artists. That's a great point, Chris.
Yeah.
And Martin has, I like this. He goes, AI won't replace humans, but humans with AI will replace humans without AI. And I tend to agree with this because, I mean, it speeds up a lot of things like creating show notes for podcasts and all that stuff, but you've got to keep that human element in there. But that's a great point there, Martin. And Gary says, it amazes me how bad audio quality remains on Teams calls. Folks talking to a laptop mic, clients can hear that too. It's funny. Chris and I have talked about this before, but we think there's some algorithm, like the more rich or famous a person is, the worse their audio will be. Because like I do guys podcasts and Ian interviews huge people like Benioff and stuff, and I swear sometimes they just open up their laptop and start talking, and it's just like trying to clean that up. Chris and I were talking about that the other day. It's not fun. So
I don't know what that says about me, but okay.
no, I mean it's so crazy that it just seems that way. That, but I mean your audio sounds. I mean we've had people commenting on LinkedIn how great it is. So, Chris also says it can take humans hearing something multiple times for it to make an impact. So very true.
That's
So
why you need to consistently use this stuff, right? You can't
Yeah.
just have it made and then let it sit around doing nothing. You need to use it, and
So-
you need to use it regularly.
So Jodi, before we move on, is there any other key components other than consistency for like the components to create an effective audio brand? We talked about consistency. What else is there that you need to, have that great audio branding?
Well, I mean, what we were talking about before, as I said, know yourself and know your audience. Know yourself and know who you want to be selling to if you're a company that sells stuff, right? Or, you're a service or whatever. Know your brand and know your audience. And when you know those two things, you can craft a soundscape that works for both of those things. Because sound is what's going to let people know who you are in seconds. They can look at a logo and go,
Right.
But if they hear you and they understand who you are in that sound, that really touches them deeper. So, like I've talked about this a lot of times before, but just to liken it to turning the sound off in a movie.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Right? I mean, think about it. So you'll know what's going on in the movie just by watching it. Okay. But do you care?
Right. Right.
I can watch a scary movie. I hate scary movies.
I'm not.
But I can watch a scary movie without sound. Doesn't bother me to see it.
Yeah.
It bothers me, the scare tactics when the sounds come
Swells
in and
up
the music gives you the cue.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like that's what gets me, right? Because that's where you get invested. So what you're doing with sound is you're getting people invested in you. That's how they care.
And it doesn't have to be complicated, because you think even on the Saturday show that we watch with Dave Jackson, he'll start his music and he goes, "Hey, there's that sound again." It's, you know, and they're just, and it's you know what kind of show it's going to be. You know what it's going to be relaxful. It's going to be conversational, but you know, hey, there's that music again where, you know, and I think it doesn't have to be, you don't have to overthink it. I mean, you have to think about it a little bit, but you also, if you're consistent and have those emotional elements to it, I think it makes a big difference. So, before we move on to the next section, don't forget about Ecamm, our sponsors, ecamm.com/Jeff. Save 30% if you go and use that code that's on that site for their summer sale that's going on. And by the way, Ian and I will be speaking at Ecamm's Creator Camp coming up in October. So stay tuned for more about that. But let's talk about, because a lot of people here, like Gary, Martin, and they do live shows, they do podcasts, Zoom calls. We know it's super important. We've talked about how important the quality is. But what are some tools that you tell people who want to start improving their audio? What are some of the tools and equipment you mentioned for them first?
Well, the reason that people tell you to use dynamic is because a dynamic mic, you can scream into it and it'll be fine.
Right.
Also, a dynamic mic won't pick up your surroundings as much as a condenser mic. So what I'm using right now is a condenser mic that is a USB mic called a HyperX. And the reason I love it is because I can change the color.
That's cool.
This is it's only on Windows machines, but on PCs you can actually, it comes with a little software program where you can change the color of the mic. So it's an LED thing. I think it's cool.
That's cool.
But I like how it sounds. Like it sounds pretty good, but I'm close enough to my mic that you're not hearing much of the room around me. So that's another thing. No matter what mic you're going to use, be close to that mic, because then you will hear less of the room. And I think part of what really bothers me in a lot of podcasts is that people are like speaking from this far away in their room, you know, like you can't,
Right.
That's awful.
Right.
That's horrible. Right. So yeah, I just, you know, whatever mic you're going to use, know your environment and be close enough to it that you're getting the best out of that mic.
So for your voiceovers, are you getting in a booth? I always think of those booths where like we used to have to raise our hand, like to when you actually have a booth that you get like sit into.
I do.
Cool.
Yep. That's the
Do they let you out
5x4. Yeah, occasionally. Just for food and sunlight, occasionally.
Just right, like, you know, please let me out. I'm done
like
with my
a plant.
voiceovers. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, that's pretty cool. Did you design it yourself?
In the booth, it was actually from a blueprint that I found online that a lot of other voiceover people are using. So I bought the blueprint, and then I had someone who was really well versed in making sound treated basements. So he was a contractor, a local contractor, and he was a musician himself. And so he had made a basement for himself for him to play his music in. So he knew the concepts. And then when I gave him the blueprint, he made it into a sort of modular unit. So the walls are in two pieces, the ceiling is a piece, the floor is a piece, and the door is a piece. And they're all made separately and then screwed together. So I could conceivably take this all. It's really heavy. It's not exactly what I would call portable, right. But I could take it apart and bring it with me wherever I moved if I decided to move. So there's that. And yes, it is made specifically by the fellow I contracted with and between us. And yeah, there are many different types of manufacturers that do this though. Studio Bricks is one. Vocal Booth to Go, I think, is another. There's a bunch of these, and some of them are as simple as PVP pipe and moving blankets.
Yeah. So Gary actually said he made it.
Get a lot done.
Yeah, he said he made a booth out of plastic piping and moving blankets. Wife sewed me a roof for it. Has an iPad holder and all. So that's really cool. Yeah.
Wow.
So there's something called a tri booth that you can actually purchase that does that for you, and it's made to be easily constructed when you're on site. somewhere that you're going to stay for a bit. And it comes in a duffel bag. It's basically a 50-pound duffel bag, because what's really heavy is the moving blankets.
Right. Yeah.
And it has a top, and it
Very
has
cool.
a clip for a mic stand and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, and in the booth, I'm using a completely different mic. So this is what I'm using for podcasting, but in the mic, I have a $1,200 microphone. Like it's a Sennheiser 416. So it's a shotgun mic, very directional, definitely condenser, and it's the mic that you see on the top of boom poles in film. And it makes the voice pop a little bit. Promo people started using it, and so it got filtered down to all of us lowly plebes.
Very interesting.
No,
So
that's cool. Is there? I was just going to say, are there any other ways, like for those of us who can't go down the the booth style thing? Is there any way to optimize our environment? I've seen people that have put acoustic panels on the wall, or is it down to the microphone? What any other ways that we can optimize our environment?
Well, like I said, being close to the mic, you won't hear a lot of the room. That just won't happen. So that is a good way to start. But yeah, acoustic panels, definitely. Putting covers on hard surfaces, having a rug, not having a high ceiling or having a drop ceiling. These things can really help. So
Okay.
it just depends. It may be worth actually getting having a consultant with an actual person who works in sound,
Yeah.
who can tone your room, I guess, because every room is different. So I know George Whittam, for instance. I have clubhouse rooms once a month with him and his staff in the Power of Sound house. And anyone can come, and for an hour, I think it's at noon Eastern, anyone can come and ask questions of George and his crew
That's cool.
for free. And he has great services that he does, and he actually does travel to people's houses. So if someone was really wanting that to happen for them, then yeah, they could talk to someone like him who would tone your room for you.
That's really, really cool. So other than getting too far away from their mic, what are some other mistakes you've seen creators do with sound, and how can they avoid them?
I think talking across your mic rather than directly into it can be a good thing to pay attention to, because otherwise you get a lot of popped P's.
Right.
And I know I was listening to the thing that I did with Dave last week on Saturday.
Yeah.
And I was popping all over the place because my mic was so hot. I think in the YouTube thing, they ask you when you're going live we were using StreamYard. And I think when StreamYard asked if you wanted it to regulate the sound for you, I didn't uncheck that.
Oh, yeah.
And I maybe should have. So I was super hot on that mic, and I've turned it down since. But knowing where you're supposed to talk into the mic can be a big thing too. Because, for instance, a Blue Yeti, you're not supposed to talk into the top of it.
Right.
It is a side address mic.
Right.
Right? So if you don't know that, and you don't know that the side that you're supposed to talk into is where the logo is,
Right.
you could be talking to the other side and hearing nothing, right? Like it just could be awful. So pay attention to where that mic needs to be addressed and where you're supposed to speak into, because that changes by the mic.
Right. Very, very true.
Yeah.
This has been so fascinating. I can't believe we're at the hour. But I want to give everybody a chance to find out you, because you also you record podcast intros for people. It's not like
I do.
It's it's not just for famous big brands.
And ads.
And ads, all sorts of things Jodi does. So Jodi, I want you to and she's got a great download too. So when you go to her website, there's a great pop-up that comes up. Make sure you fill it out. I don't usually say that because a lot of stuff is just a click, but it's really good. It's a really good resource for you if you're interested in sound. So make sure you go check that out. Jodi, where can people find out more about you and everything you got going on?
My website is voiceoversandvocals.com, so you'll find everything about me there. And if you're interested in the audio branding podcast, you can find more info on that at audiobrandingpodcast.com. And as I mentioned before, I have those clubhouse rooms.
Yes.
Now it's every other Wednesday, and if you're a member of the Power of Sound House in Clubhouse, you'll see what's on the schedule. And Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, I am there with some co-hosts of mine who are also voice talent, who talk about voiceovers and podcasting, because all of us have podcasts. So it's called VIP, Voices in Podcasting. So if you have any questions about voiceover or podcasting, you can definitely ask them in there too.
That's awesome. Yeah, great resources. Your audio will be better once you listen to her podcast and some of the resources. It really made me really nervous about my audio for today. So
you're doing great. I just want people to pay attention. That's all.
Yeah. Ian Anderson Gray, where can people find out more about you and everything you got going?
So like my website, iag.me, that's probably the best place to go. And I have carelessly scattered myself across all the socials as well. So you can connect with me wherever you want.
That's awesome. And by the way, Ian and I are doing unfortunately, the Creator Camp is sold out, but we have a way to help with that. You can actually enter to win at jeffc.com/win your chance to win a ticket to Creator Camp. That's where you can see Ian and I speak. There's so many great speakers there. It's one of the funnest. It is like camp. It's like summer camp with your kids, but for adults and a lot more fun. You don't have to climb any sort of ropes or anything like that. We do have so many great workshops. Ian and I will be there. jeffc.com/win. And the secret code for extra entries for today is PGUYEZ. So that's PGUYEZ. So make sure you guys go and use that for extra entries. And with that, thank you guys so much. Thank you, Video Like a Dad. We've got and Chris Stone in here. Martin said it was very interesting. Thanks, Jodi. Video Like a Dad also said thanks for this great conversation. Thank you, because we would not be able to do this show without you and your amazing support and great questions. And with that, we'll see you guys next time. Bye, everybody.
So much.